All right, so the next topic is pull from source. This is very specifically around OpenStack, or it will probably feel that way, although we believe that the use cases that we're working on for OpenStack are much more generic than just OpenStack. But the problem is not unique, but the problem is accentuated in OpenStack. So here's what we mean by pull from source. So one of our goals for Crowbar is that we want to have no lag between a OpenStack release and a Crowbar support for that release. And to accomplish that, we need for Crowbar to be able to stay tightly in sync with the trunk of OpenStack. So all of the deployment logic is effectively evolving as the code evolves, stays close to the milestones, catches up during the release candidate phase, and we could be testing it at the same time we're testing the release candidates. This is a huge value for our community, which I believe is focused on operations and deployment of OpenStack and other applications, because the best time to make improvements in deployability is while the code is still wet. And as a consequence, we really want to be able to shorten the time between somebody making a code change and somebody building deployment logic for that code. And that ultimately is the objective here. There's a couple of projects, Quantum is one, and I believe Cinder is going to be another one, where if we can't pull trunk, then we effectively can't build deployment logic until it's much later, and we can't influence deployment coding to improve deployment until much later. Those are primary use cases for this feature, right? The idea is that you would be able to pull the Python code directly from OpenStack trunk and deploy it. There's a whole bunch of issues Greg will get into about that. But there's one other use case I want to describe that we've surfaced as we've been vetting these features out. And it's this. You are a deployer of OpenStack. You have the system running in the field, and you are competent to modify the code and make changes to the code. And in that case, you are likely running your deployment ahead of trunk, meaning that you have a patch or a fix that you have found and you are waiting to get into trunk and potentially to get into a distro. In that case, you need to basically deploy the source code. You need to be able to deploy your own patches, your own branch of OpenStack into your account. That is another use case for this that would allow Crowbar to deploy your own private OpenStack with your own patches, changes, your own proprietary code, and things like that. This is another thing that we're enabling. We believe that the significant body of Crowbar users will ultimately just take packaged OpenStack, packaged Hadoop from various repos. But a lot of the innovators, a lot of the collaborators that we're looking for to join the community have use cases that require them to pull from source. All right, anything to add on my summary? Okay, thank you. Dependencies, very good question. We'll get there.
Right. Yeah.
Right into you walked right into the viper's nest.
Yeah, so let me talk about a little bit. Andy Aves has been doing a lot of the thought work on this. He was looking at some of the quantum stuff, and
he was the initial proponent. Anybody who's enthusiastic about this feature, send a love note to Andy, because he has been championing this for a while.
Right. So here's the current, well, not current. Here's one of the thoughts of how we're looking at doing this. We're proposing a kind of a Git bar clamp that allows for a client-server definition. Really, it's mostly server, though we could use some client helper too. That allows us to say, stage this repo on the Git server so that the rest of the universe can get it. This is to try and give us some internet flexibility so that only potentially the Git server needs to have internet access, so it's not required. And then using some of the online mode features, it allows us to deal with at least getting access to the upstream packages and dependencies. So within that context, that lets us get the code to a certain location. Then the idea is that we would update the various bar clamps that wanted to do a pull from source to pull from the Git server repo from their kind of copied mirrored source. This allows for some control and stuff. Once the system starts pulling in, the question then becomes, how do you deal with dependencies? How do you deal with the deployment changes? And this comes back to the very specific goal of the first set of features, or the first enablement aspect of the feature. We're enabling you to figure out what's broken, right? It's not a guaranteeing of what's working, right? The first use case we're trying to solve with this is, so what options did they change in Folsom that's going to break my Nova comp file when I go to use my current chef recipes to try and bring up Folsom, right? That's kind of the biggest use case that we're trying to get in now. Now, could you see use cases where you want to be able to have this in more of a out there kind of way? Sure, I could see this as a way to, like, I want to stage in my development cluster a test and then migrate it into production if it works. All that stuff is possible, but our kind of first pass focus is, can I get something in place that will let me test my existing bar clamps from dependencies or not, that lets me test whether or not my current deployment scripts mostly work. Okay. Now, we realize dependencies are a trick. We've been thinking about looking to see if there's like sections of DevStack we could steal or borrow or copy that lets us manage some of the dependency actions either through the pip installs or package updates or additional repos to hit. All those things become options. With some of the online mode stuff, you could use those together to say, go to GitHub to pull the resources using the online mode to update the repos you pull from, like to be able to hit other package caches or other things to pull in the right set of dependencies. We're still kind of the secondary and tertiary iterations of the project we're still kind of think through. But the main thing to think about is, or to be aware of, is kind of our first use case is testing the newer code. Also, a secondary aspect of that is things like Quantum and Cinder, where we know that there's some basic starts of packages out there, but we want to be able to let the community try and have a way to play with that outside of just trying to build their own bar clamp, right? So the idea is you might build a bar clamp that's just a straight pull from source kind of bar clamp to play with Quantum or Cinder, right? And as we look at some of the OpenStack features, not on this call or even in this kind of 2.0 consideration, those are some of the actions we may start enabling with this pull from source feature, okay? Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of the gist of it.
So where would people start? Where could they get involved? What would be a factor for people thinking that they're interested in this feature and they want to start playing with it?
One of the other use cases is to give people a secondary kind of use case that we think this could enable is the ability for people to more actively attempt to use the open source code bases to test multi-node deployments in a more multi-node way than just DevStack. Since using DevStack kind of for multi-node deployments is possible, but not.
Actually, along those lines, what we're hoping is that people will make improvements to make OpenStack more deployable in a multi-node framework and have a way to test it, so that you don't have to rely on sort of a full cycle iteration as to whether or not your change makes something work better in a multi-node sense. This way, you could actually make the change, test it, bring it in. Ultimately, we'd love to see people, and we've seen this a little bit in the list, but we'd love to see people using Crowbar as a way to, as a reference, have repeatable OpenStack deployments that are multi-node, inherently multi-node. And then, therefore, the problems are reproducible across multiple sites.
And in a kind of in a reuse what you've got perspective, we're also looking at or thinking about using the same Git server for potential database backup and uses as well, for like storing snapshots, recoverable snapshots, those kind of things, just so that we can have seem like an interesting idea to track and control some of our ordered archival purposes, right? We'll see. That's just another aspect of how we might use some of this, the plumbings that are going into some of this pull from source feature.
Right. Plumbing is almost certainly going to involve having a Git server on the admin node or admin nodes.
Or somewhere, right?
Right, because one of the things that we're moving towards is being able to distribute the admin node. That doesn't show up on this list because it's not a Crowbar 2.0 refactor item per se, but it's one of the design goals that we have. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for... didn't mean to hide my Skype channel. Hey, Skype audio back channel has been set up. So if you ping Mike Patero, he can add you in to the Skype back channel for audio via Skype. Excellent. Thank you, Mike. So you didn't answer my original question. What's a good place to watch for early changes or get involved in online mode? Besides pinging Andy. Abe's.
Or you mean for pull from source?
Pull from source, sorry. Pull from source.
Yeah, probably the Ether page. This is right now currently behind some of the database work and Rails 3 work.
Right.
So some of that is we pinging Andy, pinging me, pinging the list in the Etherpad here would be good ways for us to start talking about what that means for people and how they could see them using it. Right. It looks like Christoph has been pointing out that they're actually just building the packages and using that just straight up. We've thought about that. We haven't thought about that service particularly. And so that could be interesting to consider as well. I think there are cases where we'll still want a Git server, but that's interesting as well.
Yeah, I do hear that people want to be ahead of trunk as part of this, and that's a design goal. So one of the things that I think Greg is saying is that this is going to be more in the second wave of the refactor effort. So we have to get the database and Rails 3 and some of this core work done. Online mode, I think also. So if you're eager to do this, helping get the other things going is a good way to start. Also, though, this is the place where some of our Folsom activity is going to be happening. So if you're really invested in helping us get our Folsom work moving quickly, online mode is going to be integrated into the Folsom activities that we have. We are already planning a Folsom deploy day around the time frame of the Folsom release candidate. So we're really hoping that these things line up so that we can work all that out. So keep that in mind. This will be a really good place if you're waiting for this feature but don't want to help develop it. Being part of the deploy day is going to be where you can sort of see how well it's come together. If we have trouble with this, we will go back to packages, right? That's what our backup is. But we're really expecting to have this be one of the ways that we get involved in OpenStack releases sooner. If you don't care about OpenStack, we appreciate your patience for the last 15 minutes. But I do feel like this feature, when we get it right, will help you in Hadoop deployments. It will help you in deployments of your own applications, probably even more than anything else. I think this is more generally applicable for that type of use case where somebody's writing their own application and they want to deploy it from their own source repositories. All right, Greg's typing. Good. So I'm going to move into the next topic. Our next topic